President Thieu's order to the South Vietnamese army to abandon the Central Highlands did not include the regional military forces and the militia. As news leaked out, they and the civilian population panicked. What was supposed to be an orderly withdrawal soon descended into complete chaos. Military units, their families, and 400,000 fleeing civilians jammed the primitive road. The 120-mile retreat down Route 7B was a nightmare. North Vietnamese artillery shelled the column, and NVA infantry blocked the road. Food and water ran out. A South Vietnamese Ranger battalion of 700 men successfully cleared the NVA roadblocks, but was itself eventually wiped out. By the time the column reached the coast, a third of the 60,000 troops that had set out were dead or missing. Of 400,000 civilians, a quarter had disappeared. Meanwhile, the North Vietnamese army launched a second major attack. 100,000 men converged on the major cities of Quang Tri, Hue, and Da Nang. They were spearheaded by powerful armored forces and backed by 8 full regiments of artillery. And when news of the debacle in the Central Highlands reached these cities, panic set in. Worse still, the South Vietnamese Elite Airborne Division, based north of Hue, was ordered to return to Saigon. The North Vietnamese plan was to attack from 3 directions. They meant to drive southern forces back to Da Nang. There, the enemy would be trapped and destroyed. Quang Tri province was quickly captured, followed by the town of Tam Kỳ to the south. Refugees surged along Route 1 towards Da Nang. At the same time, the NVA advance threatened to cut Route 1. South Vietnamese army units were now ordered to abandon Hue and Chu Lai and retreat to Da Nang. On March 25, 1975, Hue, South Vietnam's 3rd largest city, fell to the North Vietnamese army. The mass of refugees were by now converging on Da Nang. Over 2 million were already crammed into the city, including tens of thousands of armed deserters. North Vietnamese rocket and artillery fire was slamming into the built-up areas and the docks. Fleets of ships and small boats crammed the harbor, and there was a frantic scramble for places. Thousands drowned or were crushed. Many were shot by troops or armed civilians in the desperate competition to escape. Over the next few days, the NVA just rolled into town after town without a fight, towns abandoned by the South Vietnamese forces. On March 30th, 1975, the North Vietnamese army took Da Nang. It was just over 10 years since the first U.S. Marines had stormed ashore there. For the South, it was a shattering blow. Yet its leaders did little, clinging to the hope that American air power would finally intervene to save the day. By early 1975, 5 weeks into its campaign, the North Vietnamese army had made stunning gains. "12 provinces and more than 8 million people were under their control. The South Vietnamese army had lost its best units, over a third of its men, and almost half its weapons. Northern leaders were astonished by their own success. The question now was, could they press ahead and take the capital, Saigon, in a war-winning blow? Originally, they had not planned to get this far until 1976, but now it would have to be done within 3 weeks, before the rainy season disrupted operations. The first attacks of the Ho Chi Minh campaign opened on April 9, 1975. The only effective resistance to the advance took place at Xuan Loc, where for almost 2 weeks, Southern forces made a desperate and die-hard stand. The North Vietnamese threw more than 30,000 men at Xuan Loc, backed by powerful tank and artillery forces. Against all the odds, the 6,000 men of the South Vietnamese 18th Division refused to crack. In 2 weeks of bitter fighting, the North Vietnamese hit the defenders of Xuan Loc with 20,000 shells and rockets. Still, Southern forces drove back mass infantry attacks. They killed over 5,000 NVA troops and destroyed dozens of tanks. It was to prove the last big battle of the Vietnam War. In the end, the defenders were forced to pull back. 1 in 3 of the South Vietnamese 18th Division were dead. The fall of Xuan Loc meant the road to Ben Ha and Saigon itself was wide open. With the direct threat to the capital, on April 21st, President Thieu resigned and fled to Taiwan. Members of the Provisional Revolutionary Government in Paris had earlier indicated they'd be prepared to negotiate with General Duong Van Minh, a trusted intermediary. However, for the moment, the Southern government was paralyzed. A mass exodus of foreigners, government officials, and the remaining Americans was already underway. Saigon docks were crammed with boats as thousands tried to escape by sea. The northern plan was to encircle and destroy the remaining defenders outside the capital. That way, the NVA might avoid costly street fighting and the destruction of the city. On April 25, 1975, they launched their final assault. One by one, the defending South Vietnamese divisions were cut off and overwhelmed. On April 28th, as NVA forces pressed in on the city, General Minh was sworn in as president. Attacks on Tan Son Nhut Airport closed its runways. Only helicopters now offered a way out. Starting on April 29, 1975, U.S. Marine and Air Force helicopters flying from carriers offshore began a massive airlift. In 18 hours, over 1,000 American civilians and almost 7,000 South Vietnamese refugees were flown out of Saigon. The helicopters were leaving from Tan Son Nhut Airport, now besieged by refugees desperate to escape. The scenes of panic and chaos were repeated at the U.S. Embassy, where helicopters were landing and taking off from inside the grounds. U.S. Marines flown in to protect the evacuation struggled to control the thousands of terrified civilians fighting for a place. At 4:03 a.m. on April 30th, 2 U.S. Marines were caught in a Viet Cong rocket attack on the airport. They were the last Americans to die in the Vietnam War. A constant stream of American helicopters shuttled between embattled Saigon and the rescue fleet off the coast,